Love you. Bye-bye. So that's our beautiful Angie, still not feeling up to snuff, and we look forward to her joining us next week and wishing her a very speedy recovery. So tonight we have a very lovely lady joining us on the show. She's been a past guest, and we enjoy having her very much. She travels North America as a chef for world-class race car teams, including Andretti, Rahal, and actor Patrick Dempsey. She owns Kent Coffee and Chocolate Company, and in my world, that's a perfect pairing, just so you know, in Connecticut, and is the #1 international best-selling author of the book We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. Please welcome to the show, Sandra Champlain. Sandra, how are you tonight?
Hi, Lynda. I'm great. Can I just say a few words about Angie? Because something just touched my heart after I heard her speak. Many people know me from, I think, the website. Many people don't. But a year and a half ago, I wrote my book, which is We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And even though the title is what it is, the main thrust behind it, or a big thrust, is helping people through grief, because I wrote it after the death of my dad, and I really had some tools to make a difference with others. And I was just thinking about Angie and how we met, and I needed people to read my book and critique it before it really got launched on the marketplace. And I thought, who is my target audience? And it was people suffering from grief. And I thought, well, how do I get to people? And it really was searching on the internet, and lo and behold, I found Angie's Grief the Unspoken Facebook page. And there's, almost 500,000 followers, and I thought, I don't even know who this person is, but I just thought I'd write. And what I basically said is, this is who I am, this is what I'm up to, this is the message I have, and if there's anybody in your community, would you be willing to share, that I'd be happy to send them a free copy of the book, electronic copy, and if people would want to review it, I would appreciate it and give their comments and stuff. And so out of that, Angie and I have become friends. We finally got to meet face-to-face this few months ago. I got introduced to you. The book has hit the bestseller list, #1 in U.S., UK, and Canada. Angie and I had started, it's her website, griefawarenessday.com, and I know you and her have your shared goodgriefww.com, but I invited anyone who is interested in reading the book and getting the audio. I have an audio called How to Survive Grief, to go to that website, and it's still there as a free download. And from the time that I made that bold request to the unknown, wonderful Angie Cartwright till now, there's probably about 15,000 people that have gotten the grief message and how to help ease the pain and all the things, all the education that I have about grief. So it's so easy to just, oh, Angie's here, and, nice to hear Angie's voice, nice to hear Lynda's voice, but to really let it settle in, like what a magnificent woman Angie is, and what a giving, caring, compassionate leader she is. And, Angie, I just wish you feeling great, because we need you big time. I compared her to the captain of the ship. She's, we're all rowing, but she's leading the way to really helping so many people. And I love you, Angie, and Lynda. I'm blessed that I get to be connected with you now. But it's, it's so easy to have things just kind of become regular, and we're used to them. And I just thought, what? No, Angie is so darn special.
Oh,
and
indeed.
I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. I mean, I get tons of emails from readers about the difference my words have in their life, and most of the time I have no idea how people find me or how they find the book, but I have a sneaky suspicion that some way or the other they've fallen some way through either your talk show or Angie's website or her Facebook group. So it's a big deal. It's really a big deal.
Sandra, thank you for those words, because Angie is truly a very special human being, and phrase it that way is a big understatement. She has touched the lives of thousands upon thousands of people in their darkest hours. Right. And that is such an amazing honor. And she gives so much to people that she's never met and comforts them. I mean, it's just, she really is a true gift, and it's an honor to be by her side. It really is. On the show and in all the other endeavors that all of us do with Angie. You know, in fact, you know, Sandra, I would like to invite our listeners, after we talk a bit about tonight's subject of anticipatory grief, I'd like to invite listeners to call in, and knowing that Angie is listening, and for them to have an opportunity to share their love for Angie and lift her up. What do you say?
Yeah, and maybe, and Angie, I know you're listening, and you probably have a big box of Kleenex, and she's probably crying right now. Because, you know, it's so easy to live in our own brain, and we do the best we can, but we all have this inner self-talk. Oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I should be doing more. You know, all that. And I'm sure Angie's got that going on too. But just to let this be really a gift, like what she's brought to our life. I mean, even to know people come to me that are in so much pain, and to be able to introduce them to one of Angie's groups on Facebook. You know, I had a mother just write me that her daughter had committed suicide just a few months back, and obviously she's having a real tough time. But to, you know, Angie's group for parents is almost 4,000 people in it. And, you know, I've lost my dad, and my grandmother. That's the grief that I've felt. And I know it's so much different to lose a child, as you know, and to be able to connect people like that. And she's a special woman. So I'm all for that. We'll talk our talk, and anyone who wants to let Angie know the difference that either her personally or one of her groups or what she's created has made in your life, I think that would be awesome. Awesome.
Me too. I think it's a gift we can give Angie, because she has given so much to so many, including me. And you know,
we know. I'm getting a little silly here, but part of my message about grief is, and we'll get into it, about how the brain operates in the grieving process, and we lose a lot of our healthy brain chemicals when we grieve. And I know our show is about anticipatory grief, which is grief that we can feel before we lose a loved one. It's when, like, our health changes and we have concerns, or anytime we have a loss on the horizon, the grief can kick in. Well, one of the things about acknowledgement and gratitude is that it raises the feel-good chemicals in our brain, like the serotonin, the endorphins, and all of that. So we're actually helping Angie to heal, because as she hears these words, you know, she's going to be smiling, she's going to be uplifted. It'll put a surge of these healthy chemicals through her body, and there we go. We'll get Angie all better by our show tonight. How's that?
I think that's a done deal. And you know what? It even goes a step further. The listeners that take the time to call in to share, you know, some comforting words for Angie will make them feel good as well. So it's a win-win.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will.
Yeah. So tell us about, before we start taking some callers, tell us about anticipatory grief.
Grief is, and we'll get into it, about how the brain operates in the grieving process, and we lose a lot of our healthy brain chemicals when we grieve. And I know our show is about anticipatory grief, which is grief that we can feel before we lose a loved one. It's when, like, our health changes and we have concerns, or anytime we have a loss on the horizon, the grief can kick in. Well, one of the things about acknowledgement and gratitude is that it raises the feel-good chemicals in our brain, like the serotonin, the endorphins, and all of that. So we're actually helping Angie to heal, because as she hears these words, you know, she's going to be smiling, she's going to be uplifted. It'll put a surge of these healthy chemicals through her body, and there we go. We'll get Angie all better by our show tonight. How's that?
I think that's a done deal. And you know what? It even goes a step further. The listeners that take the time to call in to share, some comforting words for Angie will make them feel good as well. So it's a win-win.
Yes, it will. Yes, it will.
Yeah. So tell us about, before we start taking some callers, tell us about anticipatory grief. That is a big subject right now.
Yeah, it is. The first time I had learned about anticipatory grief, I didn't even really know about grief. It was, my dad had suffered with cancer 5 months before he died, and probably, I would say 2 months before he passed away, our family was in just a huge turmoil. I mean, I have 3 siblings, and we went through this period of just fight
the dark. That is our motto with grief, is bringing it out of the dark. And there are different forms of grief, including anticipatory grief or preparatory grief. It's safe to say that those are the same thing. Is that correct?
I would think so.
Yeah.
And I just had this vision in my mind of caregivers. I was on a show just this past week, and the gentleman who gave the show, his wife had a stroke and has half of the use of her body, and I think that happened when she was 52 years old. She's got 20 words in her vocabulary. This, not only her grief from her loss, but now as husband and wife, and as this gentleman now becoming the caregiver, like the woman's still on the planet. He loves her very much, but it's clear their life will never be the same. So it is navigating through those waters.
And that's a tough one. I just did a blog entry on that myself within the last week, and about whether counseling is helpful or not. And I shared that we had undertaken counseling after losing our daughter, and then we were blessed with a wonderful counselor who walked into my husband's hospital room on the heels of his major stroke. And knowing that we have the same story as the host you were on last week, my husband has the stroke robbed him of his speech and his reading, writing, and math, and paralyzed on his entire right half of his body. And so I started grieving for the husband that I had prior, even though he was still alive. And he's doing remarkable now, 2 years later, remarkable. And we have found our footing once again. However, the grief became once again very dark for me of what does the future hold. My wonderful, intelligent, strong, incredible husband is now had to relearn to walk. He started with a wheelchair and then a walker and then a cane, and we learned how to speak. His speech will always be challenged. However, I feel very grateful for how far he's come, but there is a lot of grief that I experienced about my husband, even though he was alive, and it was right on the heels of grieving for my daughter, who was no longer alive. So there are many different forms of grief. And I apologize, Sandra, you might not have known that about me. So thank you for,
actually.
Thank you for sharing your story of the host from the show you were on last week. I have a lot of matching pictures with him, and that is something that as Angie and I prepare to take the stage together in the future, and I won't give away too many details yet until everything's set in stone, but talking about grieving for the living is something that's very near and dear to my heart. So that is something that I plan to speak on, not just grief from losing a child, but also grieving the living. And that's what happens when you have a life-changing stroke or heart attack or accident that renders your spouse or loved one or partner, very compromised. and you begin grieving for that person or your life that you had before, even though they're still alive. So very sensitive topic there. I don't think many people thought about that, thought about, well, oh my gosh, I was grieving, but they do, and you do, and it's horrible.
Yeah, and there's something expected about an actual physical death. And as painful as it is, I mean, the person's gone. And so theoretically, we think, someday we'll always miss the person, but that the grief can subside and that you can at some point kind of get back into life and things like that. Whereas with anticipatory grief, the future is uncertain. It's how to kind of deal with that perpetual state of grief. And something else I even thought of is, I know we talked about it on our show last time, but for the listeners that didn't hear, when we lose a loved one, very often there are horrible family feuds, and almost half of sibling relationships come apart when a parent dies. 80% of spouses get divorced when a child dies. They say 90% of couples get divorced if one of the two get diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. A friend of a friend was diagnosed with cancer, and her husband are now going through a divorce. And it's like, whoa, like what in the world happens? And one of the things that I'm really passionate about is when we talk about what's literally going on in the brain and like why this is all happening. And there's some things that I spoke earlier about these brain chemicals and healing Angie, but it really is something where like a car needs gasoline and it needs oil and it needs transmission fluid and power steering fluid and brake fluid and all those things to operate. Our brain has these essential neurotransmitters running through the system to keep all systems functioning. And so without having them, and when we're grieving and we go through a significant loss, basically our bodies and brains are in a state of shock, and it takes time to readjust to the new reality with whatever it is or whoever it is that we lost. And I often compare grieving, and this might be a poor example, but if we can picture somebody that just got taken off some kind of drugs or alcohol, that was addicted to them, you can imagine that poor person that is, everything in their system is like craving whatever that addictive substance was. And when you look at them, they could be shivering, they could be in pain, they could be crying, they could be angry. They're not getting their fix. And when we have love in our life and that love is no longer there, that person is no longer there, or there's a devastating change in someone's health, what's happening is like the withdrawal system symptoms of an addiction. Like I said, this is a kind of a crude comparison, but the feeling of love really is like there's all kinds of like chemical connections we're making with other people. And when that's no longer there, you really have to have compassion, because there's the feelings of anger and sadness and shaking and tears that never stop, and all those things, that deep dark place that we go when we're grieving. But also our system, these neurotransmitters, like I said, like the power steering fluid and things, they control things like our memory, our mood, our perception. Our whole communication center is based on these neurotransmitters. So for example, if we don't have a healthy level, our communication stinks. We think we're remembering things, but many of us know, and if you even think back to a time, and some of us right now, or some of you really are grieving severely right now, it's like you just feel like your memory's not there. My friend called my mom not too long ago to tell her she's grieving, to tell her something that had happened, and then she called back the next day with the same exact story. And my mom says, you just told me that yesterday. Well, the woman has absolutely no memory of having that conversation with my mom the day before. So why I'm bringing this up is when we're grieving, our focus, our minds are not sharp. We're not really storing information, or we may not be exactly how it happened. And I believe, Lynda, that this is what happens during why there's so many fights. We're fighting over things that really didn't happen, or we didn't see it the right way. And if we can have compassion for those of us involved with grief, know that anger is definitely like a side effect when we grieve, but have some understanding, have some love, have some compassion, work through a loss as opposed to fighting and coming apart, because not only may you be having the anticipatory grief of something on the horizon, or health changes, or becoming a caregiver, if you lose a relationship with a family member, you're going to grieve even more. So I think it's ultra important to really understand the whole world of it.
Because that does add to your grief, but you're right. It compounds your grief by adding another layer of grief of a severed relationship with a sibling, or, and so, Sandra, take us back to the time when your father was passing. He lived for 5 months, and then your grief shifted from anticipatory grief to what we would consider as normal grief.
Yeah, and it's, I don't even know what the phrase is. It's not an oxymoron, but that word first came to mind when you just said normal grief, because
I know, right?
When you were saying before Dad died, it was such a hard place, future uncertain, knowing the love of my life was slipping through my fingers, and there was nothing I could do. I literally read every book I could, was doing all these extremely funky, I don't want to say alternative healing methods, but I was thinking, okay, maybe the power of prayer and laying my hands on them, and I mean, it's some really bizarre stuff, but I mean, reaching for every straw, along with traditional medicine, and like, gosh, there's got to be some way I can help my dad, and I mean, the emotional turmoil was terrible, and the sadness, and talk about not getting any sleep. I mean, really difficult. I spent some nights there at the hospital with him, and anyway, so all that was going on. And then what was kind of funny, not like laugh out loud funny, but was when you said after he passed with normal grief, and I'm thinking normal grief, because
there's no such thing.
Well, no, but what made it funny is just the fact that I was in the deepest, darkest, lowest part, couldn't believe there was any way out of it, the most painful, I mean, I keep saying dark. I know there's over 1 million grief-related suicides a year, which is just horrific. But, I mean, I wasn't contemplating suicide myself, but I could understand people that would choose to. Like, it made sense. Like, I had never felt that bad and that low, and like there was no hope in sight. And there was, because I had all the feuding with my family members. Dad was gone, plus running a business and regular responsibilities of life. I wanted to be completely alone. It's always great to have support and all that. And like, I didn't want anything to do with people. And I am grateful, Lynda. I am so grateful that like some like the light bulb went off that said, hey, wait a minute, Sandra, you've spent, at that time I was 44 years old. It's 4 years ago since Dad died. But you spent 44 years being this happy-go-lucky, positive, smiley, wanting to make a difference for people person. And all of a sudden you are completely upside down, flat on your back. You have no desire to go on. And it just hit me like, I wonder if this is all part of grief. And that thankfully had me learning not just typically what people say will happen when we grieve, but feel so low. Why am I having so many arguments and disagreements about things that didn't even happen with the people that are closest to me? And then that's when I kept digging till I found an answer. And when I found out about this whole brain chemistry and all the different impacts of grief, not just the ones that we hear about all the time, just for your listeners that don't know my story, I felt so passionate that the information that I had now found, which really helped me, when you can understand something, you can use it as opposed to being used by it, So, I was no longer on this autopilot grief course. I could recognize that I'm feeling tremendous guilt. Well, actually, guilt is part of the grieving process. Okay, so I'm feeling the guilt. I was able to sit with it and then let it go, and then keep practicing the letting it go, letting it go. And ultimately, everything that I had learned about grief, I put together in an audio called How to Survive Grief, and 70 minutes. It's free. I bought the domain name survivegrief.com, and still exists, and people can just go there and download it or press play. But in just 3 months after Dad died, after making maybe 5 or 6 posts on Facebook, this is long before I met Angie, and I didn't have too many Facebook friends, but it spread so fast. It got to the point within just a few months that 3,000 people had heard it. And people started writing me with just incredible, I want to say results, but it's more like ease of pain, understanding, hope, being able to work through a loss together as opposed to fighting. And then the final thing that happened was people started reporting that they did feel that ultra low place, and they actually were considering and planning suicide. And then they heard my words and realized where they're at was indeed a part of grief, and then they used my steps and moved through it. And so, I know we're talking about grief here, but if you've never heard me speak before, you might be thinking, but why is their book titled We Don't Die? Like, it's got nothing to do with it. Well, it actually does, because when I realized how much healing those words had about grief in people's lives, I almost felt like it's a moral responsibility to get it out there as much as I can. And so I had this little secret I was living with, and that was I had been somebody who was afraid of dying, and very secretly went on this expedition to find out if there's anything that can soothe my fear and just rest my fear that I know that when my body dies, Sandra will go on. And I never believed in spiritual stuff, and I was not a New Age person, and actually bad-mouthed people that believed in mediums and psychics and all that, so I was pretty grouchy. But through my investigation, I studied science, medicine, the world of, the psychics and the mediums, and just everything I could. And the day came that it's like, oh my gosh, there's nothing to be afraid of. My fear disappeared. I was so comforted and really, without a doubt, believe we go on, believe our loved ones are still around, believe that our life is for a much bigger purpose than we know. And so I chose to use the vehicle to get the grief message out, a book called We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death, because I don't know how many people even know they're grieving. The ones that do, are they necessarily going to look for information on grief? Not necessarily, but mankind's biggest fear is dying. We hear about it all the time, all the people that love watching Long Island Medium and, the different things like that, which I love her, but that are looking for evidence that their loved ones go on. And it was kind of a sneaky little manipulative tactic, but my book really talks about my journey of why I believe in life after death, and I really believe I deliver on the goods. But that grief audio that I just told you about, well, that is chapter 10. So like it or not, people are going to learn about grief, because I believe in people learning about it and obviously having the best life they can. And then the remainder of the book is how to have a great, powerful, fun life while we're here on planet Earth. So I just wanted to make that connection for your listeners who might be asking.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And you are such a wonderful spokesperson for how to have a good life. And you are a testament that we can find the sunshine after the darkness. So let's take a caller, and we can continue the conversation about preparatory grief, anticipatory grief, any kind of grief in between our callers. But let's take a call. Hi there, you're on the air with the Good Grief Talk Show. What's your name?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi there. What's your name?
I didn't actually press the button to talk to you guys. I was just listening to the thing.
Oh, okay. Well, no worries.
Yeah, no, I actually tuned in late. I'm kind of actually do have one question. I missed the first half hour. There's a way to get that later on?
Yes, we are available on iTunes, and also you can listen to past broadcasts on goodgriefww.com. And but also they are available in iTunes, and you can just search for Good Grief Talk Show on there. And just to bring you up to speed, the first half hour, we were blessed with having Angie help me open the show as usual, but she has been under the weather, and so she is listening to the show now. She has gone from being a co-host on the show to listening just for tonight. She'll be back as a co-host next week. But if you have something you would like to say to Angie, we're lifting Angie up tonight. She has been quite ill, and we miss her, and we decided to let our listeners and callers tell Angie, knowing that she's listening, how much we love her. So do you know who Angie is?
I do. I have never met her, obviously, but the posts that she puts on Facebook, those really help me. My husband just passed away 2 months ago, so we were only married 4 years. He was 3. Yeah, it was horrible. So. From cancer. So, yeah, the posts that I read the posts, and they really help me. So, everything she puts on Facebook generally helps. So just to let her know that. And, yeah, it's been a huge help for me. So just let her know that. So, and I don't have a place to write anything down. I wasn't prepared. I didn't. But anyway, I'll go to iTunes, and then I go to, what was the other thing, goodgrief.com?
Yeah, we're goodgriefww.com, and all the past broadcasts are there.
Okay.
And but if you can't remember that, just look for us on iTunes, and you'll find us there. So, so you lost your husband 2 months ago to cancer, and my sincerest sympathy to you. Tonight we are discussing anticipatory grief, and Sandra, who is our guest tonight on the show, is talking about losing her father to cancer. And do you have any thoughts you'd like to share with regards to the journey that you took with your husband passing from cancer?
Probably nothing really any good. It was just horrible. I've lost my mom to cancer, my husband to cancer, my stepmom to cancer, friends from cancer, you name it. But, yeah, it's probably not anything any good. I saw him go from a somewhat healthy person to married, and we lived long distance, 200 miles from each other while we were dating. And then when we got married, he finally, we were married 4 years, and he was sick. It was 3 years this weekend he was sick, and we had not even a year of marriage, maybe a year, but it was all, changes and things like that. So probably a year of marriage before he got sick. So, and he was 56 when he got married, so he wasn't young. It wasn't like he was married earlier for 25 years or anything. He never got married. He waited his whole life. So, but anyway, so no, nothing really any good about cancer. Yeah, I mean, I have friends that's been supportive, but nothing in terms of cancer. No, nothing good. So, yeah.
I'm so sorry for your loss. It is, even though I talk about life after death and our loved ones are still around and that life is for a purpose, and I can be positive. There is, after seeing my dad die of cancer, I can't make any sense out of suffering. And that's the one thing I don't get, is why it has to be so painful on everybody involved, especially our loved one. It is torture. I mean, it really is. So I'm so sorry for your loss. And just anybody listening tonight, I know everybody's part of the Angie and Lynda's community, but if you go to the website griefawarenessday.com,
Yep.
Angie and I have put a copy of my book there that you can read, and also that audio.
Okay, awesome. So tell me, I should have, and I didn't know. I seriously didn't press the button to talk. I didn't do that. That's a little weird.
It's no problem. Yeah, griefawarenessday.com.
Okay, but if I go to Good Grief, www, whatever, it'll probably be there too. The website.
I think so. If not, just email the gals and we'll make sure we get it to you.
Okay, so griefawarenessday.com. Okay. Well, thank you for your help. I've been trying to find more information about like that to see for real twice, things like that. I've been doing all that stuff too. So yeah, I've been doing all that. So trying to figure out who's good medium to go to and just all that stuff. So yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight and sharing. You know, it's losing anyone to cancer sucks. I'm sorry. There's just.
It was awful.
Said politely. Yeah.
It was awful. I gotta go plug my phone in before it dies. But basically, the only thing I would ask you is I did get signs in the beginning that he was around, but I haven't gotten anything recently. So I don't know why he's not giving me signs now, but he was for a while. Now he's not, so I don't know what's up with that.
Well, we'll keep talking to him. I think it takes some work to make signs happen. So you can still trust that he's around, because I believe that anytime we call upon them, whether we get a sign or not, that they can be there. And, I know you don't have any way to write down, but for anybody listening, my website is wedon'tdie.com, and I have an audio called Reconnections that you can click on, and you play it before you go to bed at night or when you're taking it, before you take a nap, and it's a 20-minute kind of visual imagery, but it quiets down all the self-talk we have going on and puts you in a real safe space, and you can actually invite in your loved one that you have lost and have the conversation you want to have, or just know that they're with you. And it's kind of hard to explain the whole thing in just a couple of minutes here, but you can see it on the website and it'll make a little bit more sense, because I do believe he's with you and your mom and those that we have loved and lost. I mean, I don't think people are around us 24/7. In fact, there's a book out called Do Dead People Watch Me in the Shower? And I think the title is hysterical, but, it's a common question. Well, if we don't die and people are still around, I mean, are they with us 24/7? And I truly, this is my belief, believe that here on earth we're here to learn and love and grow and make a difference for another, and that there is a purpose for our life. And then when we cross to the hereafter, whether you call it heaven or the hereafter, there's still more learning to be done. There's still more growth. So no, people are not just hovering with you all the time. You do have privacy, but in those moments you need to talk. I mean, they're just a thought away. So to trust that he's with you, and anybody's listening, that your loved one is still with you. And I encourage people really to download that free copy of my book, because there's so much evidence that people are with us, and it's, I was the heavy-duty skeptic that didn't believe in any of this, and the one comparison I have is hundreds of years ago, people believed that the earth was flat, and they knew it was flat. It wasn't even a belief. I mean, the earth just was flat, so people weren't even willing to consider that it could be round. And of course, it took someone actually circumnavigating the earth in a ship to prove that it is round, but it still took 300 years to get the conversation on the planet going that it really is round. Some people lost their life saying that it was round, and no, it's flat. So life after death, there's so much evidence between science, medicine, when we really do the studies, that it is out there. It's just not a common conversation, and so it does give you a little bit of more of trust and faith, and hopefully some peace especially on the journey through grief, to believe that our loved ones aren't gone. So I wish, obviously I can't deliver it all in this call, but, you can read the book.
I
That will make a difference.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say I definitely appreciate you talking to me. I really didn't push that number to talk to you, but
well, what a gift you were.
So, huh?
I said, what a gift you were, and to know truly there are people that are, they're not even dialing in, or would they dare push the button, and whatever you had just said, somebody is in the same exact shoes, and they're sitting home thinking, oh, I'm so glad she was on, and that conversation happened. So just, you're a gift, and I'm glad that we got to talk.
All right, well, thank you. And again, I can have a long conversation about the life after death thing, because sometimes doctors will say, oh, it's the medicine and what happens to you and all the drugs they give you and all.
Think to us.
Yeah,
we'll
I
be
will. I'll go to all those websites, and hopefully I can get the beginning of the call. So thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome, and thanks for calling in. Have a good night.
Thank you.
What a lovely lady. And Sandra, that is another topic that people are curious about, but it can be challenging to open the door, the dialogue, and that is about, do we die? And last week we had Lorna Bell. She is one of the coordinators of the retreat that Angie will be a mentor at here in the next couple of weeks over in North Carolina. And it's a Widow's Peak retreat, but it's not just for widows, it's for all grievers. And she's an RN. She's written over 5 books. And in her experience working with people who are dying, she has come to firmly believe that we don't die. And talking with her was quite fascinating. And it's interesting that, you talk about, physicians are trained from a scientific standpoint. And science is all about connecting the dots. And so if the dots don't connect, they can't prove it. And if they can't prove it, they're almost ridiculed to believe something they can't prove, right?
Right.
And, and so your analogy of it took someone navigating around the world in a ship to even open that dialogue, and then it took another 300 years to convince people. And just because we base so much on proof. But I myself, just putting it out there on a personal note, am a big believer in we don't die.
Lynda, we have so much fear, I think, as human beings, and so nobody wants to, kind of upset the apple cart. So it's much easier to go with the flow. Even when I decided to write this book, of course I needed a publisher. I went to a workshop about writing a book, and I actually lied the whole weekend when people asked me what I wanted to name my book, what my book was about. I felt safe in sharing grief. I was petrified what people would think if I said life after death. I mean, petrified. And so just as the conference ended and I was walking out the door, a publisher grabbed my hand and said, did you enjoy the conference? Yes. Are you interested in writing a book? Oh, yes. And then he said, what do you want to write your book about? And Lynda, it was like literally there were the 2 roads out there. I could lie and just say grief, or I could be honest and say, yes, grief is a part of it, but this is the big picture. And it took every bit of courage I had in my system to verbalize what I wanted to do. And I was trembling and my eyes filled with tears. And this man said, come sit over here and talk to me. And I'm thinking, oh my God, he's going to think I'm a lunatic. And he's quite Christian, the publisher. And so I thought, I'm going to offend him talking about this, and he's going to think I'm insane. Well, just the opposite thing happened. He was so taken by my words and my story, and I spent almost an hour sharing my journey and why I felt this was important. And he said to me, do you really think you could write something like that? And I said, I do. and I'd never written anything before, and that man took a chance on me. And for this book now to hit #1 in 3, U.S., U.K., and Canada, to have men, women, seniors, I mean, all kinds of people read it. And even what I love is the people that are the most skeptical. Many of them have read it and have been like, oh my goodness. In fact, there's a man that saw my book title and he blew it off like, there's no proof of life after death, there's no way. But something got under his skin. How could somebody title a book, We Don't Die, a skeptic's discovery of life after death? So this man bought the book on Amazon, read it, contacted me, said, you brought me from atheist to believing in something. And it blew his mind. It gave him hope, gave his life purpose, gave his life meaning and direction. I live in Massachusetts. He flew to Massachusetts, spent 2 days with me. He's an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker, and he produced a 50-minute documentary on my journey. He said, I just want to give back. He says, not everybody is going to take the time to read a book, but if we can have people watch a movie, what a difference that would make. And so this, that video is on my website, WeDon'tDie.com. There is a small charge for that. It's $5.99, but he created it, so I wanted to make sure I gave back something to him. But why I'm telling you this is that it's controversial, yes, but I think I deliver it in a way that can take people, and I'm not out to convince anybody about anything. I simply talk to the reader. Here's my story. This is my investigation. These are some of these things I was out to prove weren't possible, only to prove they are. I mean, so many of us have heard of near-death experiences, and probably the woman you spoke to the last time on the show was talking about people, so often in those last moments that people are alive, they can actually see into heaven or into the hereafter. They can see people. They feel like they're being greeted. I mean, there's some really awesome things. I know of a man, when his father passed away, not only could he see there, but he was recognizing people that were deceased that he had been in a coma previously and had no idea these people had passed away. Yet when he was kind of looking through the veil, he saw them. When we hear of near-death experiences, the skeptic wants to say, well, that's just a part of our brain shutting down. Yes, we can see a light. Yes, we might hear music, but there's no proof that, there's anything other than that. Well, I beg to differ. There's over 300,000 documented cases of near-death experiences. Many, those stories of people floating above their bodies and being able to see. But one of the most amazing things to me is one man, Dr. Ken Ring, only studied the near-death experiences of blind people. And 30
interesting.
people, yes, who had near-death experiences that had never had vision in their life. Those moments that they say they flatline and they float above the body and they can look down. Well, these people had vision for the very first time. They could see, one lady could see her husband talking to the doctor, and the doctor dropped his pen, and the husband bent over and picked it up, and he was wearing his green shirt. I mean, things so specific. So easy for us to be skeptical and easy for us to say that's not possible. But I want to just challenge people because we all know that we have this I call it an inner critic or the voice. Like we constantly have this mind chatter going on. It's often like, when you wake up in the morning, it's the one that wants to hit the snooze button, or you look in the mirror and like for me, too many gray hairs speaking through, ugly, fat, should get back on the diet, still single at 48, something's wrong with me. I mean, it never shuts up. But I think that voice we all have is just part of the human dynamic. We all have it, but the thing is that voice isn't really necessarily telling us the truth, because if we were to question the people closest to us and ask the people around us to describe us, like, for instance, somebody in my life might say, wow, you're so outgoing, you're successful, you're funny. Some people say I'm beautiful, and like my inner critic here now wants to argue with all this, but you get enough people telling the same story, that I'm compassionate and generous and I love to make a difference. Who do we believe? Do I believe this little voice that wants to hit the snooze button, or do I believe 10 people in my life that all have the same story? And the truth for every single one of us listening tonight is we are not really who we think we are. We are who other people say we are. We really are those good, wonderful, loving, generous. Angie, I know you're still listening. Unbelievably phenomenal human beings, and we all are making an incredible difference on this planet. And so that little voice is the one that's convincing you to be skeptical. Oh, there's no proof of life after death. Oh, my loved one's gone, and when we die, it's just over. Or, and and here's something, if we can tie it back into grief and anticipatory grief. A couple of the side effects or impacts of grief are things like anger, and are things like guilt, and the crying that just never stops. And I think it's important to feel feelings when they come, because they say what you resist persists. So if you keep pushing away, trying to cry, you're going to even cry harder, when it does sink in. So, but when you're overwhelmed with an emotion, I think it's important to feel it, but recognize it, that it's a normal part of grief, and then let it go. For instance, if you're feeling guilt, and we all do it. I had this thought to call my grandmother on whichever day it was, and then I said, I'll call her tomorrow. Well, tomorrow never happened because she died that night. And so for months and months and months, just the guilt of, like, I could have talked to her one more time. What a terrible granddaughter. Now, guilt is normal, and again, it's not pleasant, but it is normal. But if I were to recognize then that, like, okay, that's why I'm feeling this. Let me take a few deep breaths. Let me just try to quiet my mind. Okay, let it go, as opposed to stewing on it. The more we stew on a certain thought, our brain does this wonderful thing of helping us create new habits. So if it's the habit of brushing your teeth, that's fantastic. Some of us know that we can't fall asleep at night unless we brush our teeth. But there are also habits created for things like overeating, or, say, feeling guilty. And so why I bring this up is, if you're in anticipatory grief or full-blown grief, they both feel equally as miserable, I think. But to realize that if you're caught in an angry cycle or a grief, guilt cycle, okay, I recognize it, this is what I'm feeling, feel it, but then slide something else in to kind of short-circuit the pattern, because you don't want to just be automatically feeling guilty every single moment when you wake up in the morning, say. So something I like to do is, if you can take a few just deep breaths to try to just get into the present moment. Before we got on the show tonight, I had my window open and I was just listening to the birds chirping, and like every bit of my attention on those birds chirping, not on thoughts going through my mind, and that can quiet my mind just for a moment. And then to just kind of slide in the thought of, what am I grateful for? And we can all find something, even if it's a small thing, that we're grateful for. And then maybe put in something else that we're grateful for. And it could literally be as simple, and then sometimes it's hard to look for the good in things when it seems like our world is collapsing around us. But even to just recognize, wow, I have a roof over my head. I was just recently in Los Angeles and realized there's 70,000 homeless people. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, no food, begging for food, no good water, no public bathroom facilities, no roof over their head. I mean, and so, yeah, I'm grateful for a shelter, things like that. So that's just one thing I just want to contribute, because we do not want to start like that new habit for whatever thinking in the grieving process.
It does ingrain kind of a new pattern in your brain, a new pathway. when you, have repeated thoughts over and over and over again. So whether it's negative or positive, it still creates a new pathway. And by spending 5 minutes having compassionate thoughts about yourself or having a heart full of gratitude helps to balance the sadness, and it can introduce the opportunity to create a new positive pathway in your brain. And, having a heart full of gratitude is so incredibly hard when you're grieving, because all you can think about is that pain. And for non-grievers, the best analogy I can give would be to imagine yourself laying there with 2 broken femurs, 2 broken leg bones. You're in great pain, so it's very hard to think, gee, I'm grateful I have a roof over my head. However, to be able to just spend a few moments not focused on the grief, which is hard. It takes a lot of effort not to focus on the grief. So if you can do that and think, just as you said, have the gratitude for what you do have good in your life, that will help lift your heart. It builds upon itself. And I'm a big fan of that. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because grieving consumes you. And it takes a lot of hard work and some very dedicated, choice to say, okay, I'm going to be grateful for hearing the birds sing, because they're going to sing whether you hear them or not, right? And and go ahead. Yep.
Oh no, I thank you for letting me interrupt you. I know when not only when you interrupt that thought and say you put in the gratitude or whatever, it's also from a chemical level. When we're not present to the grief, we're not really stewing on whatever that is. It can allow some of those neurotransmitters to start building again in the brain. So anything that we can do to put ourselves in a situation, I know we just can't flip a switch and all of a sudden feel good, but if you can feel better, if there's a book that you're reading, or if there's a movie you want to watch, or even put on your favorite song, go outside, get some sunshine, listen to the birds chirping, pick up the phone, call a friend, just try to get a little distraction going on away from the intense pain. Like our minds can only think one thing at a time, and even if it's 3 seconds that you're listening to the birds chirping, or whatever that is, you're outside and you're smelling right now we've got lots of lilacs out here in Massachusetts, smelling the lilacs. Even for those brief moments, that allows some of these neurotransmitters to start building again. So it's definitely not an easy process, and unfortunately the only way to get to the other side of grief is to go straight through it and feel it. But we've all heard stories of people that have grieved 30 years, and that's what I'm aiming to, I think we all are, to prevent. When we can understand grief, when we can be in a community that is helping us through it, when we can realize how incredibly painful it is, there is some normal things that happen. When I started reading the books that I did about grief, and I realized, I wasn't losing my mind. This is actually normal. And people that have heard my grief audio and have read my book are realizing, oh my gosh, she's expressing everything that I'm feeling. Okay, so, there is nothing wrong with me. This is grief. And, I think because we've never, ever been educated on grief, there's no Grief 101 that we take in 8th grade. That just doesn't happen. But because we're not educated about it, we can often feel like there's something extremely wrong with us, like we should be some other way, or that we should be over it by now. That's something I hear all the time. You know, I was given a week off after my husband died. I should be over it sooner than this. People that don't know grief, I mean, I know this ticks off everybody, think, oh, you know, you're not over it yet, you know, and the fact is, the more you love, the more you'll grieve. And, you know, it's like a double-edged sword. Yes, were we grateful to have that love in our life? Yes, but it's going to hurt even more. And when we think of somebody that dies that we didn't know, you know, I'm sure at some level for a second we think, oh, you know, that's too bad, and I'm sorry for their family, and, you know, but then we're back going on with our life. You know, we're not thinking about it anymore. But take somebody that we really care about, we really love. We have those chemical connections going on. We call it love, but I mean, it is the real deal. So when we do grieve, it is a withdrawal, and it's brutal. So really, have compassion for yourself. Have compassion for anyone that you know that's had a loss. You know, it could, I mean, depending on the intensity of the relationship, I mean, it could be a long time, you know, and there's no set date. You know, that's why, like, just to even have your show, Lynda and Angie, you know, what a difference just to feel at home. And even this show is a great distraction, to put it that way. I mean, anybody who's listening right now, to just be able to listen to us and not be presently really thinking about whatever's happening in your life, actually just does kind of flip the switch from grief just to getting a little bit of healing going on in the brain circuitry, you know, if you put it that way. So any opportunities that you can to put yourself in a feeling better, you know, situation, really do it. Thumbs up. Go for it, you know.
Yeah, and you know, I'd like to add to that in a book that I co-authored this last fall, I offered 5 steps to finding the sunrise. And for listeners who aren't familiar with my story, it's been almost 5 years since losing my daughter in a car accident. And, you know, I knew instinctively early on that I had to fight really hard to see the beauty around me, because my world became very, very dark. And I'm glad that you brought up listening to the birds, Sandra, because that was what I honed in on in those early days, was hearing the birds. We live in a wooded home. We've got an acre and lots of wildlife around us, and I'd always loved all that wildlife. And suddenly, with the loss of my daughter, my world lost all beauty. And it took great effort to hear the birds sing. Even though they sang every day, they never stopped. I had to work really hard to hear them again. But what I offer to people is that with practice, you eventually get to the point where it no longer takes effort. And now I hear the birds sing, and it's just as beautiful as it was before, and it takes no effort at all. And that balances out the sadness in my heart. And for that, I am grateful.
Oh, absolutely.
I do want to touch on something that's interesting. You brought up a little bit ago in the show, is that with skeptics and those of us who believe that we don't die, and then the old school that says, you know, it's a chemical reaction in your brain, blah, blah, blah. You know, I offer this as a testament that the night that my daughter died in a car accident, I got to sit with her in the field with her body next to the car. Wow. And I held her hand. And then I looked up into the darkness, and I saw my daughter being led away by my grandmother. And you can't tell me that that was a chemical reaction in my brain, because my brain was not dying.
Right.
I was the living, yet I witnessed this. And I said out loud, I love you, Pooh Bear. And
Oh.
all of those law enforcement, all of the first responders, the medics, it was just a beehive activity because it was a car accident with a fatality. And they were all behind me, witnessing me sitting there with my daughter, and very quiet, very respectful. I could feel the love surround me. And when I looked up into the darkness and saw that and audibly said, "I love you, Pooh Bear," no one flinched. So I wonder if they had witnessed that before. But it goes back to that old, the medical world had always believed it was a chemical reaction taking place in a brain that was shutting down when they would think they would see loved ones coming to get them, and this and that. So my argument is I was not the one crossing over. I am the living who still saw this.
Yeah. Have you heard or have you read Dr. Raymond Moody's most recent book? It's called, Dr. Raymond Moody is the physician that coined the phrase a near-death experience, back in the 70s. So, I mean, he's been at this a long time. Well, he's got a book out called Glimpses of Eternity, and it's just exactly what you're speaking about. It is stories of family members and close friends that shared this experience, whether you call it a near-death experience or whatever you call it, when it's the person that hasn't died that witnessed something completely miraculous. And sometimes in the book there are stories that two people witnessed the same exact thing when someone passed away, whatever it was. So that's another argument for, this is possible.
Sure.
And going back to that little voice we all have in our head, we get so used to what we have around us that we just think it's normal and we take it for granted. At one point, our planet just had on it trees and rocks and dirt and water, and from those basic elements, the founding people, they were able to build their weapons out of stone and sticks, and they built huts. And, well, fast forward to now 2014, we don't just have houses. We have automobiles. We have airplanes. We have technology. And all of that just stemmed from those basic water, earth, trees, rock. I mean, that's mind-blowing. And then if you think even a couple hundred years ago, if you were to tell someone living then that we'd have something like our iPhone and FaceTime and GPS signals, and even as simple as, they were being moved from here to there with horse and buggy, to talk about the automobile, this mobile that worked without horses, they would think you're insane. And then not only to have that, but there's going to be a little box inside of it that is going to play music and have voices coming out. And of course, we know that is the radio. And for us, that's a granted. I remember when I was a kid going to Epcot at Disney World for the first time, and they had one of the rides was called the Carousel of Progress. By GE, it was a big deal. And I remember as a girl, it had one of the things said, someday there will be a computer in every household. And so there was this kid, this like dummy of a kid, just the mock of a kid in front of this computer. Well, the computer was absolutely enormous because, that was the idea of a computer back then. And then I just remember being a girl going, oh my gosh, like I can't even imagine. And then there was another one where you could see two people talking to each other on, it looked like televisions, but like they could actually see each other as they spoke. And like in my head, I'm thinking, that is so futuristic. Like I can't even imagine that. And it's like, that's what we have today. Like we call it FaceTime or Skype. It's very real. But see, now we're used to it, so it's no big deal. So I want, and one of the things I share is like there's not a single one of us that really knows and understands how the heck our cell phone can take a picture or send a text and it goes up through gosh only knows where it goes, down to another cell phone or our computer, and it works and all that. Around us right now, most of us have this wireless internet. We all have radio waves. We all have television waves. We have GPS signals. Like this whole invisible world is happening. We can't see it, but it's very real. So as far as the life after death goes, I say, our loved ones are around and we just can't see them, just kind of like in that same invisible spot. And it's, our brain, that inner critic inside of us wants to fight. But, just think how far technology's come and we just take it for granted. So, like I said, I'm not out to convince anybody of anything, but there's a level of living life that is really wonderful when you just don't accept things as they are. When you start going on your own inner expedition, when you look at, as much as we can all suffer, and we can, and many of us are right now, but when you look back on your life of the ups and the downs, like all of those things had to happen for you and me to learn these lessons to get to be where we are right now. And even with my dad's death, and I could see no way out, and it was an incredible, painful experience. And do I still miss him? Absolutely. But for me to now partnered with you, partnered with Angie, partnered with the publisher, and have had 15, 20,000 people hear these vital words, grief and helping people live a great life and things like that. Like that couldn't have happened had I not gone through that terrible low. And so while I don't have the answer of why people have to suffer the way they are right now, there is the possibility that you will grow from this. You will, at some point, somehow, like it was necessary for you to be the person you're meant to become. And, even looking at Lynda and Angie right now, you didn't just wake up one day and decide to have the show and give your life to making a difference for people. You both suffered tremendous, tremendous loss, and you're now giving the gift to other people of understanding, of hope, of a community. And correct me if I'm wrong, Lynda, but does it feel wonderful to help another life?
It feels, for me personally, it's an honor.
Yeah.
And I used to be a volunteer firefighter EMT for a number of years when
Wow.
I spent time helping those trying to save someone's life. There was a few times where I was with people that passed, and it always felt very honorable to be with them and to for them to feel love and compassion and cared for in their last moments. And now it feels very honorable to walk with someone in their darkest moments because I know that dark. And my personal mission is to, just like Angie, to bring it out into dialogue. And
Right.
only then will people become more comfortable with the idea that we're not crazy, we're grieving, that it's normal to forget everything, and it's normal to have moments of anger. It's normal to feel guilt. It's normal, and so, but also for me, it is to walk beside others. And yes, I miss my daughter with every breath. And yes, I grieved hard after my husband's stroke. But I can honestly share that I have moments of peace. I have moments of joy in my life. And I am so grateful that I have reached the point where I can see the sun again. Yes, I still have my cloudy moments, but the sun is out there a lot more than the cloudy moments. And when I have a cloudy moment, a grief attack, I just write it. I just let it, let the wave ride over me. I let the tears flow, and my world becomes very dark. But I know that the sun will come out again. And so for my personal, for wanting to have this show and my blog and do all the great things that Angie and I are partnering together, and you and all the other lovely souls out there, is to just let other grievers know that their world can hold hope once again. They can feel joy once again. And most importantly, when they're in their dark grief attack moments, they are not alone. And that feels to me just a huge, huge honor. It's an honor to be with them in their darkest moments.
And everybody appreciates it beyond belief. And you just brought up two things that made me think, oh, we didn't mention that. When you said you would write, are you talking about like journaling?
Well, I have a blog, strugglelove.blogspot.com, and sometimes I write about things that are controversial. I just wrote a blog entry this last week about whether counseling can help heal a broken heart. And it's interesting, the comments that people leave. And I can only speak from my own personal experience, but by sharing my personal experience, and you sharing your personal experience, and Angie sharing, and all the other wonderful souls out there, we make it easier for others to pipe up and say, gosh, I felt that same way. And by doing so, we're reaching out to each other. And when you reach out to each other, you help each other heal. And go ahead.
Well, I just wanted the website for your blog again.
It is a strokeoflove.blogspot.com.
Okay.
And I talk about grieving. It's my own personal thoughts, and whether they're right or wrong doesn't matter.
They're yours. It doesn't matter.
Well, it's not, I don't put them out there for people to judge them. I put them out there knowing that the person who might need my thoughts, it will get to them. And it's okay for those to leave comments if they don't agree. And, just to sum it up real quick on this last entry last week, I shared that about 18 months after losing our daughter, my husband and I agreed to start counseling. We were in the black abyss and were both very overwhelmed with the grief, and felt like I was ready for some help. And yet I was so exhausted with just trying to, get from moment to moment in my life, that the very act of even finding a counselor felt overwhelming. And so I finally mustered enough strength to Google counselors in my area and settled on the first number that I saw. And we started counseling with a lovely lady who said, well, I don't have grief. I'm not an expert in grief. However, I feel confident that in all my years of counseling experience, I can help. And so we went, because it was just too overwhelming to think I might, have to find someone else. And she did not help. We spent 18 months with her, and she did not help, but she didn't hurt us either.
Right.
Yet she really did not have the knowledge that we needed to guide us.
Right.
And yet I was too exhausted to try to find someone else. Well, then my husband suffered a debilitating, massive stroke. And in our hospital room comes a neuropsychologist who routinely made rounds with all the major stroke victims, and his job was to help them transition into their new lives that is left in the wake of disability. And he instantly knew, I swear, Sandra, I think it's somewhere in our medical charts, this glaring neon sign that says, grieving parents, grieving parents, grieving parents, because everybody in the hospital seemed to already know that we had lost a child. And so when he came into our room, he was already aware that we were still in the throes of grieving for our child, and now suddenly we were in a whole nother beginning grief journey. And he was wonderful. And we still see him routinely, though the frequency changes depending upon, when it gets around the holidays, we struggle a little more.
Oh, sure.
Yep. When it gets around Allie's birthday or the accident anniversary, we might see him a little more frequently, and then other times it might be less frequently. But he has been incredibly helpful. Now, you have to understand that in the very beginning, a lot of people were saying, you need to go for counseling, after the accident, after Allie's accident. You need to go for counseling.
Right.
And I thought, oh, my gosh, no. I am not going to be stuck in a room full of people who are stuck in their grief for 10, 20 years. No. And I thought, no, wait, I don't want to be part of that group anyway. I don't want to be grieving. I don't want this life. I don't want, and that was my mindset. So I thought, heck no. And so I thought, how can a counselor tell me how to grieve my child if they have not walked the journey themselves? You can't tell me you can learn this stuff from a textbook. And so to make a long story short, Dr. Ford walked into our life by virtue of my husband's massive stroke, and thus began a very healing counseling relationship. And so I blogged about this last week on that. And it was interesting, people leave comments. And it also, there are some national resources that also republish my blog. And they've asked permission, and I, of course, I think that's wonderful, and I'm honored that they would even ask. And so it gets to other places besides just my blog. And then, of course, we'll share it on the different Facebook pages and such. And people are pretty opinionated about counseling. And so, so my blog is just my own personal journey, but I usually try to write something that I think will help somebody somewhere, and I don't know who they might be, but I just know that it will get to the person it needs to, and I don't worry about those that might disagree with me.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. And sometimes just the act of getting it out of your head and out, even if it's onto paper or journaling or anything like that, can be a huge thing. And I don't, I had a couple interesting things happen not too long ago. One lady, just random stranger, sent me an email that she's been to the counselor, she's been to church, she's been to grief support groups, she's, read so many things on grief, and she's like, nothing helped me. And then she says, I don't even know how I found your book, but she's like, I've read chapter 10 and now I feel like I'm free. Now, not free from the grief of losing her husband, but just the understanding and being able to sleep at night. And then not too long ago, I was at a Barnes & Noble doing a book signing, and this woman approached me, and she says, I already have your book. I just want you to sign it. And she introduced herself to me. She's actually a grief counselor, and she and I share the same veterinarian. We both have cats. We bring our kitties to the feline hospital, it's called, in Massachusetts. And after I put my beloved kitty Millie to sleep, I was unbelievably devastated. And this was before my book came out. And the day after I put Millie to sleep, I had to read the final draft of my book before it went to print. And Lynda, when I read it, it brought so much peace to my system and understanding, and just was like, and it hit me like this is the impact, because when we lose a loved one, and very often we can love our animals, I think sometimes more than we love some people. So I mean, love is real. And so this woman, long story short, went to my veterinarian, and my vet has a dozen copies of We Don't Die and the grief audio that she lends out to people when they lose an animal. And so this woman just wanted, yeah, she says
that's wonderful.
So it's fantastic. But she came to me, that Dr. Bird is the cat doctor's name, which is funny, that had given her a copy, and she says, I just had to meet you, because she says, you know, that the grief audio and the book, she's just like, it's just like, I don't want to say one-stop shopping, but it opens the door to what we're feeling and we're experiencing, and just sheds light on a very big subject in a very easy to read way. And, you know, I certainly do, you know, recommend further things. I know I'm not the be-all and the end-all, but, you know, I think counseling's good for some people. I think, you know, I didn't get it, and I was also that same person. Like, I didn't want to be in a room with the crazies, you know, that sort of thing. But that's not the case. And for some people, having an outlet like having this radio show, having one of the support groups that Angie's created, it lets us put our deepest pain and thoughts into communication and feel like we're part of something and that we're not alone. And like, that's our support group, that's our counseling. And, you know, God bless Angie and you. I mean, having been there before, it is easier to talk to somebody who's been there as a person that's never been and thinks, well, you just do it this way, or you should be over it by now, or whatever. No.
Yeah.
You know,
So let's take a caller with the last four digits, 4614. 4614. Hi there, you're on the air with the Good Grief Talk Show. What's your name?
Melissa.
Hi,
Hey,
Melissa.
Lynda.
How are you?
Melissa.
I'm struggling right now.
Well, I'm glad you called in.
I have to see a therapist, too, that I do not like. I'm forced to go there because in March I tried to take my own life. But I'm just angry, and I feel like I've lost hope, that I'm never going to see the light. And I don't know what to do with myself anymore. I don't want to go see a therapist, but I'm court-ordered, and he's not a grief counselor, and I'm just angry today. Why my son? Why me? Why?
Well, Melissa, first off, I'm very glad that you called in. It gives us an opportunity to hold you and walk beside you. And it's an honor to do that. So thank you. And Sandra, Melissa is, she lost her son. And she is on Facebook. And she's a lovely, lovely lady. And I'm blessed to have her as my friend. So, and she did attempt suicide in March, which, you know, anyone in the black depths of grief, it's very common to have those thoughts go through your mind.
Definitely.
And, you know, Melissa, we've told you before that we're very glad that you're here with us, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. But Sandra, do you... Go ahead, hon.
Overdose, and when I had my mini-meeting with Sunny, she mentioned suicide, and I can't accept that. I still believe it was an accident because he was addicted, and and ever since then, I cannot come to peace with that.
Well, yeah, and Sandra, let me fill you in. Melissa was a caller on another show called Ask the Angels, in which the wonderful international Christian medium Sunny Wells is host. And
wow.
yeah, and Sunny is, she and Christine Dominiak are hosts of the Ask the Angels, and it airs on the first Tuesday of every month. And it's really a wonderful show. And Melissa called in needing a bit of comfort. And so, Sandra, do you want to share any thoughts with Melissa that you might have about, We Don't Die, or anything that you think might be comforting?
Well, Melissa, I just want to give you a gigantic hug, and I can't because we're far apart. But if you can just feel it coming from Massachusetts, I can't even begin to imagine the loss that you've experienced. And I haven't been there, so I don't think I'm the one that can give you the perfect thing to say, perfect answer. But what I can tell you is that you're loved, you're valuable. What we've been talking about tonight, and as crappy as this sounds, it's not your fault what you're feeling right now. When we hit that level of loss, you really, your system is going through haywire, and that's how much love you have in your heart that it hurts so bad. And all I want to do is, my first reaction was, Lynda, set us up on Facebook. I want to send her my book. I want to send her my movie. I want to, be in communication with you if you're willing, because I don't have any magic wand, and I don't pretend to, but I want to give you everything that I've got. And there's so much that, we can't get into, here on the couple hours together. But if you're willing to have Lynda connect us on Facebook, I'll send you a copy of my book. I'll send you a copy of the movie. It can lift you. Hopefully. My prayers are just enough. And because, I really think you're a gifted human being with a lot of love in your heart, and I have no idea
I just feel trapped in this.
Yeah.
I have other children, and one older, and one 24, and one 25. 14, and I know they need me. And I was doing good for a while. I have to take a lot of medications,
Right.
and I'm just having a bad day, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. He died in his sleep here, so I have to see his room every day, and I relive
Right.
it every single day.
Right.
And I had no outlet at all for 2 years. It's been 2 years and 5 months. So I found Lynda and Angie's group online, just somehow, from postings. I don't know. I feel like it was sent to me. And that's where I have found the most help. But right now, I feel helpless.
Right.
And I don't know the words to say. I just wanted to call in and ask for prayer. And that maybe talking with someone would ease me a little bit tonight so I can rest before I have to go do that place tomorrow.
Yeah.
And
some things
sounds
it does
crazy, but
it doesn't sound crazy. I just, even for those just brief moments that you can, like you said, you found Lynda and Angie, and get involved with one of the groups, or even just listen to what other people are saying, it makes a difference. And it's just, if it's not your fault, there's no, you've had no choice but to play this hand that you've been dealt to you, and it's been dealt to you. And it's like, when we are going through something like this, and we have such a severe grief, it's brutal. It is beyond brutal, and I can't even imagine the loss you've had. For me, I lost my dad, my grandmother, and my cat, and you expect those older in an animal to go, but certainly not children and loved ones like that. So if you're willing, and Lynda's willing to connect us on Facebook, I'll give you everything I've got, and I'll be another person that you can talk to, and I can reach out to you, and I think some of the words in my book and even in the movie, some of it'll be eye-opening enough that it might just, like you said, like getting on this show tonight, just carry you through just for a little while, and sometimes those series of just a few minutes here and a few minutes there, they can build up to maybe an hour here and an hour there, and then maybe in time, a few hours here, and then eventually a day here, and it's just small series of that. But try to be gentle on yourself. Try to be compassionate about yourself. Try to imagine that it's a good friend of yours that this has happened to. How would you treat that person? And I would bet that it's with love and kindness, and compassion and nurturing. And it's very hard to pull ourselves out of it sometimes when we're deep in it. But not a bit of this is your fault. It's awful, 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 and and just be in communication. And Lynda, hook us up on Facebook, and then I'll send you a little care package, okay?
And I appreciate that, and I'm going to go.
Yeah,
I
wish I could
really
do more.
Upset. And no, every word has comforted me, and I have to take my night medicine, so.
Okay. Thank you,
I
Melissa.
appreciate y'all all, and just hold me in your prayers tonight.
Definitely.
And I know all of our listeners will do that as well, Melissa. So thank you for calling in and sharing your journey with us and allowing us to walk beside you. And we hold you tight. We hold you close to our heart. And, I want to share something with you that, you said you were doing good for a while, and then today, rough day. That's what I always think of as a grief attack. And when I have a rough moment, and it's okay to have grief attacks. It's okay to feel that darkness. But just know that tomorrow you might wake up and the sun might be out a little bit.
Yes.
So I want to offer that to you, that today is a cloudy day, but tomorrow the sun might be out, if even for a little while. And what you're feeling today, that hopelessness, that helplessness, that is normal.
Yeah, my heart actually aches.
Yes.
Actual physical pain.
Yes, a broken heart actually physically hurts.
All right.
I think it's worse than any other kind of pain as well. Any kind of physical pain, it's much, much worse.
I'm on it right now.
Yeah. Well, sending you a big hug, okay?
Thank you all.
You're welcome.
We will say a prayer for you and hold you close to our heart, Melissa, okay? And I will hook you up with...
Love you, Lynda.
We love you too. We love you, Melissa. All right, we've got you we're holding you in our prayers, and I will make sure that you connect with the lovely Sandra Champlain, and she will get her book, which is wonderful, to you, and get you some resources that do comfort. They do comfort. And Sandra knows the journey, walking through the dark, and she has found the sun again, and I just want you to hang on to that, because today's a cloudy day, even a stormy day. But tomorrow, the storm may have calmed down and the sun begin to shine. All right, Melissa?
All right. Good night, y'all. Thank you for everything.
Good night, sweetheart. We love you. All right.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. And Lynda, I want to share something too that it just hit me with Melissa is, I'm really grateful that you guys have created this show, because there is, or maybe someone else sitting, listening right now that doesn't have the name Melissa and might not have picked up the phone to call, but could have used the information that we said just as much. So thank you for Melissa, for being the mouthpiece to that, because even though you're in tremendous pain, you might have just been a huge gift to someone else that is in that same place and maybe is considering ending their life, or just can't see out of it. And so you could have just really verbalized something that many others needed to hear. And on goodgriefww.com, you had posted a picture that says how my name is spelt. And anybody listening tonight, if you go and you want to be my friend on Facebook, absolutely, I'll say yes, and I'll give you the links to the book and to the movie and whatever I can give you. It doesn't just go for Melissa, it goes for everybody here. I mean, you're just as special. Every single person is valuable. You're needed in the world. You're loved. We appreciate you spending your time with us this evening. No, we don't know what your road has been and the suffering that you may be experiencing right now, and I know it's different for everybody, but you are in a community that cares about you. Even if we never meet and we never lay eyes on each other, I know who you are by taking the time to be on this listening tonight, or any time, because there's going to be people that press the play button on the podcast. If you're listening and you know I'm talking to you, be in communication. So once again, Sandra Champlain is my name. I have a website called WeDon'tDie.com that even if you never buy my book, you can look at some of the unbelievable journeys that I've been on and things that I've studied, and there's a lot of grief help there. Angie and I had created griefawarenessday.com, and it's a place that you can download both my book and my How to Survive Grief audio that's just 70 minutes long. If you go to goodgriefww.com, which is what I did earlier while Lynda was talking, I scrolled down and I signed up for the newsletter because I want to be part of whatever you guys create. But that's an access to, and I'm here for you, whether you email me through my website or you want to be my Facebook friend. I am committed that, unfortunately grief does happen. It does, and I don't have the answers for why suffering has to hurt so bad. I sure wish I did, but I do not. But I do know that we can use whatever it is that we've experienced, and we can learn from it, we can grow from it, maybe not right away, and maybe in some cases, maybe not ever. I really don't know. But if we can look for the possibility, look for the hope, look for, there might be somebody else. And Melissa, you were grateful, I'm grateful that you called in and you shared with us tonight, but you could have literally saved someone else's life just by verbalizing your own pain. And that is a huge gift. And that's very, very possible that that happened tonight. So whoever you are, wherever you're listening from, whenever you're listening from this, you have a support system. You have people that love and care for you. You just need to reach out, and we're here for you.
Sandra, you are such a gift. You've been on the show now a couple of times, and your message is so heartfelt that it lifts my heart just listening to you. And
thank you.
What a gift you are. And I mean, truly, you are a treasure. And to have you on the show is always such an honor. And I'm grateful that you take time out of your very busy schedule to come on and offer comfort and thoughts, words of wisdom to our listeners in the way that you do, because it is so heartfelt that I'm in awe. I'm giving you the bow right now.
And you know what's so interesting is, and I'm sure Angie's going through this, who's still listening, as we know, it's hard to receive acknowledgement because living in our own skin, it's like, yeah, but Lynda, you don't know this about me, and you don't know this about me, and you don't know this about me. But it's like, it's really to get that that's our human machinery, that we're always going to have that voice, and thank you for that, because honestly, that actually empowers me to keep on going.
Oh,
Because
please.
I never know. I mean, we have, you never know who listens to your radio show or reads your book or reads my book or downloads an audio. We just never really know. So we just have to trust that when we're following what we're passionate about, that it'll land in the right place.
And I think, and I think grief is one of the places where numbers don't matter. And this is something that Angie and I have talked about as the show evolves. Many people, when they produce or host or create a radio show, they're worried about numbers. And for us, it's not about numbers. It's about knowing and trusting that that listener that needs us tonight, that it gets to that listener.
Right.
And, we have about 50% of our listeners listen to the broadcast live right now, and the other 50% listen via iTunes at a later time. And that's just how it happens because of the fact of schedules and such. And it is reassuring and comforting and lifts my own heart to know that I don't have to know who's listening and how many, that's not what it's about. It's about getting to those that need it. So they know they're not alone. They know they're not crazy. They know, even with Melissa tonight, she's having a rough day. We know what that's like. And she had been doing well, and then suddenly the clouds came in again. We have all experienced that. And so when you remind someone, first, that we understand, and second, that it is cloudy, but hang on, because tomorrow the sun might come out, if even for a little bit. And to be able to offer that to someone, even if, for some strange reason we have absolutely no other listeners tonight, which of course that has never happened, but, knock on wood, and she would be the only one, just knowing that we held her in her darkest hours is just a privilege, just an honor. So,
all it took. Okay, sorry.
Nope.
I'm big on interrupting. What I wanted to say is, when I created that grief audio, survivegrief.com is another way to just press play, anybody listening. When I created it, I burned a few CDs just on my laptop and gave them out at work, and had no idea the impact. And a man actually came up to me that was almost maybe 35, 36 years old, and looked me straight in the eye and told me, what his suicide strategy was, and that listening to it, he realized that everything he was feeling was grief. And I hit the nail on the head, like I was in his head. I was verbalizing his thoughts on that audio. And for him to have chosen life, and now he's happily engaged and in love, and he's got his life back, that was enough for me to have the courage to talk to the publisher, to do a lot of things that the old Sandra would never do, because I have too much fear. I'm afraid of what people will think of me. I'm afraid people won't like me. And it was like, I have to get over all of that because it helped one person. And I just have faith that there's another person, and then there's another person, and there's another person. And no, it's not the numbers game, because every single person is valuable. And if we can just touch one life, that's humongous. So this is what I'm giving my life for. I mean, this is it. And I can tell you, too, I mean, there's times that it's a whole heck of a lot of fun to meet new people and get people on track with what they want to do and living their life and not dying internally because they've lost a loved one, getting life back and even maybe creating life newly. And will it ever be the same? No, probably not. Will you ever stop missing that person? No, probably not. However, there really can be some new things that come in, and having that trust, you'll see that person again, that your life really is for a purpose, discovering that purpose, creating that purpose, getting involved with others, and, you know, and I don't know what I'm trying to say next, so you can talk.
Well, you know, I always come back to this, and I know this is a very shallow analogy, but think of it, if you can, and bear with me, because truly there are no words to describe grief. Really, there are not in any language, and so we just do the best we can. And an analogy for me is we go into wintertime, and the deciduous trees lose all their leaves. They look dead on the outside.
Right.
But then when they've gone through the cold, dark winter, looking dead on the outside, when the sun comes out, they begin to spring forth new leaves. And they get a little bigger than they were prior to winter. And that, for me, is how I often think of any huge challenge in life. We look dead on the outside. We feel dead on the inside. But if we hang on and never give up hope, when the sun comes out, our life might be enriched in ways that we never thought were possible. And, you know, so we only have a few minutes left. And Sandra, I can't thank you enough, you know, for coming onto the show. You're a #1 international best-selling author, a world-class chef who
That's right.
has a Kent Coffee and Chocolate Company, a perfect pairing in my world, in Connecticut. And, you know, you spent your evening reaching out to our listeners. So my heart is full of gratitude having you with us once again. And for listeners, for more information, visit Sandra's website, www.wedon'tdie.com. You can also find her on Facebook at Sandra Champlain. Her last name is spelled C-H-A, M as in Mary, P as in Paul, L-A-I-N. And you know, don't forget to sign up for the Good Grief Worldwide newsletter on goodgriefww.com. Scroll down to the bottom, and underneath the resources, and there's sign up there. It takes you 5 seconds. And we have some very exciting information coming out in the coming weeks. And we want you to be part of it and to be in the know. And that's the best way to do it, is to sign up for that newsletter. And I will give you this teaser that we are planning a national event taking place next April at the beautiful JW Marriott in downtown Indianapolis. And that's all I'm going to say for right now. So do sign up for our newsletter to keep on top of what's happening. It's going to be fantastic. We also invite you to sign the petition asking the government to legally declare National Grief Awareness Day. Just visit National Grief Awareness Day page on Facebook or on the website www.nationalgriefawarenessday.com. And don't forget to check out the official grief store. The newest thing in there is the Honorable Badge of Grief keychain. Comes in 12 colors and can be personalized with your loved one's name. And every purchase helps to support National Grief Awareness Day. Thank you, Sandra, for joining us tonight. well, as
You're
well as
welcome.
all of our callers, our listeners. We give a shout out to our lovely Angie. We miss you. We look forward to having you back again next week, and we hold you close to our hearts. We wish you a speedy recovery. And do join us again next week as we discuss the very delicate subject of loss by homicide right here on the Good Grief Talk Show. Thanks again for joining us, everyone. Have a wonderful night, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.